All right, so this is the, I like to call it the obligatory AI panel, because like everything in the world today, especially in marketing, it is largely about AI. But we're going to be talking specifically about consumer engagement in the age of AI. And this is not a lecture series, so I encourage everybody to speak up, add questions, raise your hand, get engaged in the conversation. So hold on a second. So to introduce the panelists, I actually decided let's let AI help with this process. Let's be on brand with this. And what I did is I asked one of the large language model platforms to write panelist introductions that are emotional. So we're going to be talking about consumer emotion and AI. So this is what it came up with. Apologies in advance to some of the panelists. So all I did was, when the prompt was, write an introduction based on your LinkedIn profile that's emotional. And I'll start off with this. Imagine a force that could transform industries, not just by predicting the future, but by feeling its pulse. Billy Howard, the CEO of Brandthrough, embodies that force. Carlos Zapata, the SVP of Strategy and Marketing at Moët Hennessy, he understands that the heart of every successful business lies not in data, but in the aspirations and emotions of its audience. Carlos. In a landscape that shifts faster than ever, where signals of change can often feel drowned out by the noise, we yearn for voices that offer insight. Barry Lowenthal, president of Inuvo, offers those insights today. Some individuals simply manage brands. Others possess the rare gift of truly feeling the brand's essence, their heartbeat, and their profound connection to human lives. Melissa Grady-Diaz, CMO of Cadillac, embodies this deeper understanding. And last but not least, Stephanie Freed, CMO of McAfee, recognizes that the most powerful connections aren't just transactional, but deeply personal and resonant. Stephanie. And last but not least, me, it says that every insightful discussion needs a skilled hand to guide it, a perceptive mind to uncover its deepest truths. Peter Weingard, that's me, will now not just facilitating a conversation, but orchestrating a journey of discovery. So thank you, Google Gemini. So let's start off, Billy, because you're really deeply involved in using AI to understand consumer motivations, consumer essence. Listening to what we just got from an AI platform, a commercial AI platform, is what you heard getting to real essences of the people on this panel, or is it just sort of mimicking, I don't know, a zeitgeist? Is it pretending to be intuitive?
Listen, I think AI is a great tool. And I think often in what we talk about with the people we work with, our clients, brand leaders, like the people on the stage here, it's a great starting point, but what AI lacks is soul. And you can't really expect to get at an emotional core and the true essence of a person through a machine, but you can get some cues and clues on potentially how to begin the journey to get there.
So, all right, so take us a little deeper. How does your work and the work of your company go beyond, what did you say, clues and, cues into something that's maybe a little more resonant?
Well, we put guardrails around AI by making sure that, yes, there are other disruptive technologies involved, machine learning and data science, but we also make sure there's always human input. So that's what we feel is critical, is that, again, AI has a lot of biases that people are potentially not aware of. So when you actually use it in service of solving a problem, for us, it's reimagining the voice of the customer through the lens of emotion. It's, again, a great starting point, but we blend it together with direct human feedback, asking people directly how they feel from a primary and secondary emotional point of view.
I want to jump in on that because it's something that's very funny when you talked about the bias that sits in AI. So we have created these persona bots, and they will answer questions for us in the voice of our customer. They will help us understand what's going on. And what we've realized is that they are people pleasers. So the answer is always, and we have to be very careful because if you're asking a question and it's going to give you the answer that you want. And so like understanding that bias and what it is. Someone else said to me the other day, what you always have to remember is like AI's main job is to provide an answer. So it's going to provide an answer and it doesn't necessarily care that it's correct, just that it answers.
That's very well said.
Let's talk a little more about brand, personality, and AI. So we have brand CMOs in the room here. How have you either used AI or tailored AI so that it really represents your brand and what you're getting isn't just like a commercial, spitting out where it looks and says, oh, Cadillac's a good car, and that's as deep as it gets?
Yeah, so internally, we've fed in like our brand guidelines, our tone. We have like brand attributes, style guides that we include so that when we're looking at testing different, subject lines for emails or, for our push notifications or, our campaigns, we're actually kind of putting them through there to see what resonates against those guidelines.
Does the answer really come out different, or is it marginally different?
No, so it does. It will tell us like what fits better with our voice and tone, or how we would change something to make it fit more with our voice and tone to be more consistent. So that's helpful. Sometimes, believe it or not, that doesn't go with what then is actually effective, which then tells us something maybe about our brand guidelines. So I think they kind of feed back and forth a little bit in terms of how you use that and then where you kind of test the boundaries, because it can give you, it's like kind of two-way, right? Like you might use it to determine what messages you test, but then when you test, you might find that the things that you didn't think were going to resonate do, and you feed that back in. So I think it's about kind of using that ecosystem and then also seeing what happens like in the wild, like in actual like live environments.
Just to build on that, I think that broadly speaking, I think the role that AI can play, it's, if AI had a persona in my mind, it could be a creator, which could be like an additional creator. It could be a smarter person than you, or that can do things you can't. Or it could be just a co-pilot. And I think that, from a creator standpoint, we really focused on content generation, just to explore. We don't use all of it because sometimes the creations, it's kind of like, it's AI generated. And sometimes that could be just off-putting because it could be check the box. But it's still good to do it because it's more, somebody talked about curiosity in the previous panel. I think it feeds that curiosity. From a being smarter, we're applying it in like forecasting models. And again, I know that's boring for most marketers, but it is part of our life.
Not
and it
boring
is
at all.
so important.
I love forecasting.
And we are applying it, to that. And then lastly, as far as Copilot, I think it's becoming like another team member. And so whether it is to it could be for a white paper, for a customer program, it could be for the verbiage on a strategy, or to simplify things. But those are some thoughts.
So I kind of just want to maybe switch gears slightly. I think that I've been really fascinated about where ideas start and how ideas start. And given the fact that this is a room filled with creative marketers, I think talking about like that very, very sort of like moment of when an idea happens in our heads, and the role that AI plays with that could be really interesting. So if you think about the entire workflow from start to finish, every workflow, no matter how complicated or easy, starts with an idea. And then every workflow ends with this idea around validation and verification. And I think that this notion of how an idea starts is still very much the domain of people. And I think that everything after that, until verification, is going to be agentified. And I think that we as marketers, right, we spend so much of our days validating and looking at spreadsheets and analyzing information and things like that. I think all of that is going to become agentified. And I think that 90% of our days need to be spent with acts of inspiration. And I think that every company, whether it's a car company or a food company or a champagne company, is going to have different kinds of acts of inspiration, which will have to be very, very sort of deliberate. And we will be spending time with our teams on acts of inspiration, which lead to big business building, changing ideas that then will get executed by agents.
So let's ask the audience, is anybody here actively using or developing agents for, yeah? And I'd love to hear, like, what does your agent do?
My agent is in particular for the marketing team to use to try and automate our data and reporting flow. So we're sticking pretty heavily on that side and leaving us the creative for now.
So there we go. So that sounded a lot like what I've heard from others, which is like we're using agents and AI to automate processes.
Exactly.
But we're talking about customer engagement here.
That's right.
So
You know.
how is it being used for customer engagement, not for speeding up processes and making spreadsheets?
So I think that customer engagement happens because a customer is going to fall in love with a brand. They're going to love what they're being told. They're going to be inspired to participate in that brand's story and culture and community. And that big idea is going to lead to some sort of community or event or something that's going to lead to engagement. How that gets executed will very much be agentified. But this notion that's going to spur engagement is going to live with humans coming from some ginormous acts of inspiration.
I would agree with part of that. I just don't think that the entire process of creativity and marketing is going to be agentified. I think you have to have humanity leading marketing in order to make human connections, and that the whole purpose of AI, at least when I learned about it, when I first started studying it as a futurist at IBM, is that its original intent, and I think its intent still today, is to enhance man and his ability to create, not necessarily replace him. But that's just my opinion.
Just if I may, I think that from an engagement standpoint, I think consumers, on the one hand, you have connection, and on the other hand, you have utility. Either solve my problem, make my life easier, or give me some kind of emotion that will make me feel X. And I feel that on some of the early adoption of AI for the utility have been those boring bots that we all hate, right? More hate than love. But the idea of utility and AI, there is a lot there. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it could be. And I think there's a point that as a consumer, actually, sometimes you don't want to talk to anybody, right? Or if you want to talk to someone, you want to talk to someone that can solve your problem. So I think on the utility side, I think there is potential, right? On the pure, more emotional side, I think we're still in the infancy. And I think the risk of that is to check the box and just to do it, where you as a brand could feel just so disingenuous or so rookie, And so I feel that we have much more to iterate and try, to really hit the emotion. But I am convinced it could have a role. But if there's no humanity behind it, consumer will see it.
Yeah, just to build on what you're saying there, I totally agree. I think connection and engagement come from insight. And AI is like this super fast, eager analyst that's going to give us insights faster. And then the human comes in and builds on that and can really build the engagement and the connection. And so I think it's just it's helping us be better faster and have more time instead of sitting there going through the report to get here's the 3 things you need to know. And then even as we're trying to get to, although they're people pleasers, getting to be able to ask questions, research in real time, understanding, as if I'm talking to a person. So how does this ad make you feel? Right. And would you rather see this or that? Or, who should we be using as an influencer, this person or that person? And getting that answer quickly and getting it better is going to help us with driving engagement.
I totally agree with that because that's exactly what we're doing at Branthro is we're using AI to help us ask people how they feel and understand emotion at scale. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot too because we talk about like bots a lot, and so at McAfee we protect you, right? So we have safety, security solutions, antivirus, but so much more. And as we think about it, and I think a lot about bots. Like with bots, you're asking a question. Like the customer has a question or you have a question, and that has to come from a place of actually knowing what you're asking. And I think a lot of the time too in our space, our customers don't know what they should be asking. And so I think that and I think this can also, I guess it depends on how you define agentic or a bot, but like whether it's reactive or whether it's proactive. So does it actually like understand your circumstance so that instead of someone asking you, how do I use this? What is this for? I'm not able to get to this part of, the product. It's saying, we noticed you are in this situation. You might want to turn this on, right? You might want to protect yourself in this way. The customer is never going to know that that's a risk or an issue to be asking those questions. So, we've been thinking a lot about the kind of proactive engagement interaction, all of the ways that like from a customer service perspective, you can use it throughout your experience to provide better utility. But then how does that also just understand that user and get in front of that to suggest the things that are going to be valuable? And that's where I think, we need to go and think is how we're using these tools to be proactive and situationally aware.
So I think that in this world that we're moving into that's going to be filled with chaos coming from AI, brand is so incredibly important for a couple of reasons. Consistency and authenticity are very much at the core of every great brand. And in a world where, and Facebook has taught us this, right? That the more hate drives engagement. So hate drives engagement, love unfortunately doesn't. And so the algorithms, optimize towards hate. And so, and I think that therefore, when you have a lot of content that's going to be created by AI using bots or automated or synthetic or whatever you want to call it, a lot of that is going to be, it's going to be a lot of sensational content to drive engagement. And I think brands have to be really careful about that and make sure that they're protecting themselves and doing very sort of like deliberate strategic engagement that's not going to play into this whole idea around sensationalism.
Yeah, I want to. Oh, all right, go.
Just one thing. I mean, I agree with you, even though I don't really look at Facebook as a guide for. And you can, and that's great. That hate drives action. Love drives action as well. I hope so. Love drives advocacy. Love drives trust, and a lot of positive emotions do that too. So I just want to be mindful of pointing that out.
Right. So this is great because this is interesting. There was an episode of Radiolab once called "The Trust Engineers" about this team at Facebook that was experimenting with people's feeds without them knowing to see that if they adjusted the algorithm this way or this way, they would make people happy or sad or whatever, right? So there seemed to be, it was interesting data that you can actually affect people's emotions. So plugging in AI and you create these really highly personalized experiences for advertising where you can possibly understand empathy or affect consumers' mood. If we have this, eventually imagine this near perfect tool that marketers can deploy where we can customize interactions at scale, is this a marketer's dream or is this a dystopian nightmare? What do we do after that anyway? You turn on the machine and walk away and let it work?
I think related to this, Mark Zuckerberg said last week on some podcast, right, about a one-click media buying sort of like operation. So his idea was that we were going to be able to activate marketing with one click. So I was talking to a creative agency a couple of years ago, and I showed them and they were looking at maybe expanding their capabilities to include media buying. And I showed them the TikTok Ads Manager platform. Have all of you played around with it? So if you go into the TikTok Ads Manager platform, you need two variables. You need a budget, and then you need the length of the campaign. And then after that, it will optimize towards whatever KPI you tell it to. And that's pretty extraordinary, right? I mean, it's completely optimizing towards outcomes. And you could spend, tens and tens of millions of dollars on that platform with just two variables. And now, fast forward, it'll even come up with creative for you. And I mean, whether that's Keith Reinhardt creative is, set that aside, because that was an amazing storytelling panel earlier today. But I do see a marketing world where, especially one that's outcomes based, where it becomes one click. And that's going to have great consequences to how all of us, work with agencies, go to market, invest our dollars, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that a little bit because I'm like playing it through. Because like my immediate answer to that is, sorry, are we having a brainstorm? I feel like we're having a little bit of a brainstorm. That, my first answer is, but there's so many things to consider outside of that direct performance, right? There's like, what are my competitors doing? What do I want to, instill in terms of, for long-term brand health versus short-term? But then I'm like, okay, but maybe I could input those that in a best case situation, it's not just the metrics, but then you also input that you want to balance for what this brand is doing. You want to be, differentiated. You want to make sure that, long term that there is a retention impact versus just acquisition. And maybe all of those things could be incorporated. I'm just thinking about all of the considerations outside of the immediate returns, because we see the returns, we see the optimizations, like that is pretty plug and play. But there's a lot of other factors and things that we're considering. And so I guess it depends on how whether or not that's like tangible enough to put into a model to react to independently, I think is.
I agree with you completely. I think that there are certain tasks, like if you were at Trade Desk and you were doing a programmatic, you could imagine a click for that. But if you were thinking about strategy and long-term brand value, I don't think that there would be a click for that. And just like, if you look at brands themselves, they're pretty much commoditized by price point, depending on who you are and what you're selling. And the difference that breaks through is the emotion and the humanity. And I believe that has to be led by a human. I don't think that could be led by a click, but that's just what I think.
Yeah, and I think to add a few things that we've been talking about today, as you think about this, it's the emotion and what the brand, in the first panel when they're talking about if everyone just uses AI, everything is going to become homogenized. If you also think about what you just said about hate will drive interaction, if we're not careful about what we're doing, it either becomes homogenized or your brand is at the fringes because that's going to get the clicks and the engagement or the outcomes. But that's absolutely not what you want your brand to be, like for what you were saying and who or how you want to be. And so I think that's the thing that as we think about one click or what any of that may be is like the fear that comes for me.
There's this idea around one click is a really exciting idea, right? This idea that we can agentify all of the repetitive tasks that we all hate is really, really exciting. The idea that, we can use these platforms to drive consumer engagement is also really exciting. But it sounds like what we're also sort of saying is that you have to be really, really, really careful about how you use all of these tools, because our brands are so very precious and they're so very, very special. And it takes so much nurturing and hugging to protect our brands. And we have to really resist just sort of turning it over. And it's going to be a real balance. And it's good that there are a lot of really smart brand stewards up here who are going to be able to navigate this balance. But I'm also really, really excited about it because I freaking love the idea of one-click media buying. And, now that I'm not on the agency side, I'm really curious to see how that's going to freaking completely disrupt all of Madison Avenue. I'm also really very sort of I want to proceed cautiously, but very excited.
I think that, what performance marketing did was to exacerbate a focus on performance and outcomes, which, listen, in a world where marketing, we're always questioning, are you adding value or not? Like, it was helpful to a certain extent, but I think sometimes we overcorrect it. And I think that's where we have to be thoughtful, and also realize that you talk about, we got to be careful. I think we got to be responsible too, because the brands are going to outlast us. And so whatever we do, we're right now are the caretakers of the brand. And so we have to think about that. So I think that, talking about emotion, particularly with the, most recent generation, tone is extremely important. And I feel that we have to be more, just more mindful about tone. Tonality, I think, has always been part of the briefs and this and that. But I really believe that can convey empathy, that can convey inclusion, that can convey I see you, that can convey, inspiration. So I feel that you are really stuck on the one click. I'm stuck on the tone. So, but I think that's what I think we should think more about.
I agree, and I think that that's what has to be at the heart of continuing to reimagine the voice of the customer, even more so through the lens of emotion. And if you ask almost any CEO, or the C-suite for that matter, at least the people that I speak to, they tell me that reimagining customer understanding through a lens of emotion is a really important thing. And I think that, as I said, what I do every day, and others I'm sure do as well, they use AI and other disruptive tech in service of that, but they have to start and end with human feeling.
Well, how do you use it in service of that? Like, how should a marketer here use AI in service of being sensitive to or being empathetic towards a customer's emotion?
Well, we create emotional lookalikes of exactly who customers are through exactly the same way you would create a traditional research study. And instead of asking open-ended questions, we put stimuli in front of them, whether it's about go-to-market strategy, creative, product innovation, and they're allowed to select as many primary and as many secondary emotions as they feel. And our algorithms, which do have AI in them and data science and other things, score how targets feel so that brands can understand what is the master brand strategy and the emotion of the all, but what is the emotion of Gen Z versus a millennial versus maybe millennials cut into 3 buckets because it's not an homogenous cohort. So again, I'm not suggesting that everyone do it the way that we do it, but the notion of agilely understanding how people feel is a critical part, I believe, of marketing going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also just say just what you did at the beginning, which is a use case that is really, really valuable in a lot of contexts, which is this is who I think we are. This is what we want to say, right? Here is an email that's going out that's trying to tell that story. And you basically give it to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever your tool is of choice, and you ask, what did you learn from this, right? It tells you so much. It tells you what is coming through and what is resonating. Like, think about an email you're sending to the board. Same thing. What did you learn from this? What was the top 3 things that came out of this, right? And when I heard you say whatever came out of my LinkedIn, I actually hate that. I haven't done it for my LinkedIn, I guess for my personal brand, but I don't like that. So I would redo that, right? So it gives you, even if the redoing is me redoing, right? Then I see, okay, what is coming through and what is resonating and how will this be interpreted? And I think that's just a great way to use that to double check yourself, to validate, to enhance and refine.
So it's like AI as a proxy for your audience to test.
Yeah, and almost also like an editor. It's like your personal editor. Like I worked in publishing, but it's like, this isn't coming through clearly. This isn't, you need to, and it, I would think of it, more that way.
No, and I think this, hitting on that is this co-pilot sounding board idea that as people get more comfortable, it can actually help you. It's more about to understand, if what you're doing is delivering what you're thinking,
right,
or to simplify. A lot of people have a hard time simplifying.
Yeah.
And so I think even just from a simplification standpoint could actually save you time and, and you still have to put in the work. But I think there is a utility there for sure.
Right. So I'm hearing a lot of utility.
Yeah.
Right? It's using AI as a way to simplify the media planning process, to accelerate research, right? What's one area where you think AI will never replace the people on your team in terms of customer engagement and marketing? What's the one area you think is going to outlive AI?
Go ahead. I was
Oh.
going to say the CMO, but go ahead.
Oh.
Yay.
So first of all, I would never say never. So, but I think for today, going back to what I said at the beginning, I think the part that is still very much human centric is that very, very, very beginning, that act of creation when an idea happens. And it's that.
Two old beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese.
Yeah. But you see the thing about, and I think that I would love to see more and more of us spend our time doing acts of inspiration as a way to manage our businesses than worry about spreadsheets and all of those types of things, which I think are going to be more agentified. I mean, just imagine a world, a job, where we as humans are going to be spending 80 or 90% of our times walking around looking for inspiration. And then we just come back and we say, okay, activate that. That's what I'm imagining.
I mean, but it doesn't seem to operate in that area, right? All the AI tools tend to be doing the fun stuff.
No,
they're going to do my art. They're going to do my
you
writing.
said what part of the human's going to be focusing on, and I'm talking about humans are going to be focusing on the inspiration that leads to the big idea, and then we'll come back and we'll hand that over for execution. And that's a gross overstatement. Of course it is. There are feedback loops. There are flywheels that humans have to participate in, but that the part that is still very much human is that act of idea creation.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, there's something about, and probably everyone has this, like you're talking to your team and you're debating and you're doing like pros and cons. Some people are people pleasers. They're like, you're right, Stephanie. I'm always like, And then there's that thing that comes out of like totally left field, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't think about that. It's like someone who's been there for 20 years or who came from this other industry or who has this totally different perspective. And you can ask AI, like, be devil's advocate, tell me the other side. But I don't feel like you get that like out of left field, like, aha moment where everyone like stops and discusses and debates. And I think that's the value. And I do think it's in like the brainstorming and the strategy and the insights, but it's hard for me to see, how you get that depth, I guess, of perspective that you get in your teams in real life.
I'm curious if any of the marketers on the panel have executed an AI project that was too good or too real, too human almost, that you needed to pull it back, that it crossed the line from an interesting tool to maybe something that was getting a little creepy or a little maybe scary to customers or.
Not really, but so we have a campaign right now. We have a new product on scam detection. And what we did was a lot of scams are AI generated, right? Like deepfake videos, et cetera. And so we used that as the campaign. So we actually created these over the top, like AI videos where it's like, a woman giving a heart, but her hands like go over her head in like a totally crazy way. Her head starts spinning around, right? And it was like intentional to say like, it's not this easy, right? But this is everywhere. And this is like, demonstrating all the places where it plays against all these different themes. The interesting part was that when it first launched on TikTok, some people thought it was real. Like some people thought that we had interns who used AI tools and just made these mistakes. And that was really interesting to me. Like that was in the comments and they were like, come on, McAfee, you can do better than this. And then right away, there were like many more people who were like, are you kidding? Did you not get the joke? And so like it all worked itself out and it was good because it was like viral and discussion. But that was one where I was like, were we not over the top enough? Like, did we let this get away from us for like a second? And then, it wasn't and it worked and whatever. But that was like one moment of intentionally using AI in an over the top way. I had a moment where I was like, So, a little bit on the edges of what you're talking about, but learning.
And then just one other one that I think was interesting with that, something that we were doing, we were creating an avatar for an AI chatbot, and we did some testing, and people preferred when she looked less human. So I think that was like an interesting of like, people loved it. They were very into it, and they're like, and I like when it's very clear that she's like not someone.
Right. I think that's an interesting area. We had a conversation before. We were talking about influencer marketing being an area where there's been a lot of sort of increased spend because it sort of breaks through the instant media plan clutter to somebody who's real and emotes. But now there's synthetic influencers, right? And I'm curious, has anybody used or created a synthetic influencer or character for your brand? Or is that on your roadmap at all?
We've played around with synthetic data in place of customers, and we have not been pleased with the results.
Go ahead.
We haven't, but I have a point of view on what you just said. I think that the video game culture also has created that acceptance for non-human, in a fun way, because it almost becomes part of. It's clear, like you're not
Clear
trying to
and
fake
fun.
it.
Yep.
But I feel that it just feels like a part of the discovery and part of a different world, which I think that from a cultural standpoint, I think that is a driver versus I think 20 years ago would be like, oh no, that's not human, that's not right.
But it's also, I think the clarity of it, that you know that what you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? And I think that the market is going to correct itself. I think the pendulum is all the way, and it's kind of coming back. And I think it's in use cases like that where we'll see where you can push both of those use cases and where you can't.
I mean, it's like they're questioning, like, what do I trust? What should I trust more and more? Because there's so many scams. And so if you say right up front, this is not a human, that's actually like appreciated, which is really interesting when thinking about that trust dynamic and reinforcing that. So
It reminds me of like the auto, when you get on hold and there's
yeah.
the audio agent. They used to be very fake sounding.
Yes.
Then they got kind of real, and there was a while where you were inadvertently talking to them and not getting, because you thought a person had answered the phone.
Yeah.
And now we're in the sort of...
That happens in chats on a lot of sites now too. I can't tell if I'm talking to a real person or not. They'll come back to me and they'll answer me, and sometimes I'll say the same thing like multiple times, and I'm like, you're not understanding me. And then I'm like, but they sound so real. They use smiley faces. They're like, how's your day? And I'm like, I think it's a person, but like, I don't know.
But doesn't that bother you?
It bothers me a lot. It bothers me a lot because I also feel like, I mean, in one case, I like wasn't getting it wasn't resonating. I was like, do I have to call? Like, how do I get around this? Or is this a person who just doesn't know and is following a guideline? But I found it very confusing, and I probably spent a half an hour with it. I mean, and I was talking to my husband, he was like, they're not real. And I'm like, but are they?
Yeah.
So it's confusing, and I honestly wish that they had said, whether it was or wasn't. So at least I felt like even if it was fake, I would have had a better experience.
I mean, let's reflect on that as our final point as we talk about the world of consumer engagement in the age of AI. Is it consumers going, what? Is this real? Who am I talking to? What? I mean, how? So you guys run big brands. How do you want customers to interact with your marketing, if not with, I don't know, people that really represent your brand in the way that you want?
I mean, well, you got the mic. I mean, we already have issues with humans, right? So I think just, so I think, I don't know. I feel that we just have to be, we shouldn't be just too narrow in just, this is how I'm going to use it. You could use it in conjunction with humanity. You can use it in conjunction with a different thing, not just to say, how am I going to use it? So I feel that more and more, you talk about inspiration, we talk about, like in real life experiences, you talk about sensorial emotion, you talk, all that stuff, I think it's it's really the future of consumer engagement. I think it might be aided by a lot of other things, but I feel like humans wants to feel.
I think today we all have to think of ourselves as tinkerers. We are all tinkering. We are all playing around with all of these tools, and nobody knows where it's all going to land, and nobody knows what's best for the brand. Or, we have ideas, and we all just all have to play around with it and see what sticks and why. We're tinkerers.
I think as we move forward, clarity and transparency are so important, especially as you get into content development. When you're talking about, using AI to take something from the brand and have different variations to create different pieces of creative that might resonate better. But as you start to get into humans, you have to really be clear and transparent about, is this really a person and what is this doing? Because otherwise I think we do get into a place that I'm uncomfortable. It seems like our customers right now are. It seems like people on the panel are uncomfortable.
And that's why it goes back to one of the things I originally said, which is you can use all of these technologies, but you have to, especially when we're using it to understand emotion. That's why I have such a big problem with synthetic data. Can you imagine going to a client or your customer and telling them that you use the machine to figure out how they feel? I mean, that might be great.
You use the machine to talk to other machines to find out how they feel.
Right, as opposed to talking to somebody and then leveraging the technology to bring that emotional understanding to scale. Those are two very different things. They sound the same, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're in the space of scam detection. Part of what my brand does is help people stay safe and know what's real and what's not real. So for us, the consideration of then what we do in our marketing or our customer service, that's a big topic of discussion. I think about, I started at McAfee a couple months ago. When I, had that experience with a brand that I won't mention, I could have pasted that into our scam detector that now I have, that we just launched, and seen, because and that's what we talk about a lot is, I think I'm very smart. I should be able to tell, right? And the fact is, a lot of the time, I'll figure it out, but it might take me a while. And there's a mental toll and strain. So we talk about there's a financial strain sometimes of being, scammed, but there's a mental toll. And if we can create that peace of mind by telling you what's real and what's not real, I think that's a real, pain point need. And so we need to do that authentically. So, right now, everything else, how we help people, that's humans helping people, and how and where we use AI, we consider that, right? And I think the transparency point, Melissa, is super, super important. If you are using it, being clear about where and how and why and how they could have a different experience as well.
We'll end on that line, AI helping people help people.
Yes, yes.
Thank you to the panel, everybody.